Hello everyone, welcome to our presentation. So today PAD270 Group 4 and Group 5 have teamed up to present a very important topic, which is the impact of colonialism. My name is ADREENA and I will be starting with our introduction. So to put it simply, colonialism is a practice where powerful nations take control over the weaker territories and the people. They do this to gain the political, economic, and or social benefits. If we look closely, colonialism has three core elements, which is the first one was settlement, where the foreigner moves in to the land, and the second one is political authority, where they take over the government, and lastly is economic exploitation, and where they take the land's riches. So when we study history, we see that colonialism has a double-edged impact, which is the claim and the reality. The claim made by the colonial powers was that they were both modernization, Western education, and infrastructures development to our lands. And on the other hand, the reality was very different. It actually caused severe long-term harm to the political, economic, and social structures of colonized societies. The roads and railways were built not just for locals, but also tools to steal the resources and ship them out easily. So to help everyone understand this clearly, our presentation will focus on four major impacts, which is the economic exploitation, political division, social inequality, and cultural disruption. Understanding these 4 points will show us exactly how history will affect us and our modern world.
Let's begin with the impact of colonialism from economic perspective. Number 1. Exploitation of natural resources. Colonial power exploit resources such as rubber, tin, and gold for their own benefit instead of developing local economy. Number 2. Economic dependency. Colonial mainly supply raw material while manufacturing goods were imported from Europe, creating economic dependency. Number 3. Forced labor and poverty. Colonial rely on forced labor and low-paid workers, which contribute to poverty and inequality among local people. Number 4. Destruction of local industry. Traditional business could not compete with cheaper imported goods, leading to decline of local industry and craftsmanship.
Good morning. Next, I'm NURUL. We'll be talking about the social impacts of British colonialism in Malaya. First, let's look at the plural society. To boost the tin and rubber industries, the British brought in a massive number of workers from China and India. This changed how simple society into a rich multi-ethnic mix. However, because the British kept these ethnic communities separated by giving them different jobs, it built the invisible walls that stopped people from mixing. Second, straining of racial relations. Because of the invisible walls that put by the British, it leads to the straining of racial relations. During these times, the Chinese community was gathered into fence in new village, which eventually grew into modern towns. Meanwhile, the Malays remained in traditional, underdeveloped village. This physical distance meant they could not socialize, causing relations between the races to become very strained. The third impact of colonialism is the education system. Instead of a unified system, the British made separate schools based on races, like Malay, Chinese, and Tamil. These separate schools is called vernacular schools, which were a direct result of British colonial policy, which is divide and rule. By keeping children separated in different schools based on their race and language, they prevented them from mixing and growing up together. Finally, we had an unequal healthcare system. Hospitals were only built near big cities and rich plantations to keep laborers healthy enough to continue working. At the same time, rural areas were completely ignored and had no access to modern healthcare. For example, the Malay races, they only use traditional medication. This proved that health was treated as a tool to make money for the empire rather than a basic human right. That's all. I will pass the presentation to my friend.
Right now, we will be talking about the political impacts of colonialism. So one of the very obvious impact in terms of politics when it comes to colonialism is the indirect and direct rule. So what is indirect and direct rule? So basically, the colonial powers are introduced through a foreign systems of governments to control colonies. Through indirect rule, traditional leaders were used to implement colonial policies, while direct rules placed colonies under direct colonial administration. So this reduced the political autonomy and decision-making power of all of local populations. Right. Let's move on to the next one, which is ethnic and religious divisions. So, as you can see in the bullet points here, I will explain briefly and through it. Colonial administrations often favored certain ethnic or religious groups for administrative positions, education, and as well as economic opportunities. These unequal policies created social divisions and tensions, which later contributed to political conflicts and challenges to national unity. Next is the weakening of traditional institutions. So, for this particular area, traditional rulers and indigenous political systems lost much of their authority under colonial rule. Colonial governments assumed control after major political decisions. So basically, after they resumed their controls over the decisions and whatnot, they reduced the influence of customary laws as well as local governance structures. And we move on to our very last point before the conclusion, which is political instability and artificial borders. So, colonial powers frequently drew borders without considering ethnic, cultural, or historical boundaries. As a result, diverse groups were placed within the same state, leading to political tensions, ethnic conflicts, and instability after independence. So that is all.
So my name is QALISAH. Now I will be sharing the cultural impact of colonialism. So first is language and education. So as we know that colonial powers introduced English and Western educational system. By this, English became the main language used in schools and administration, while traditional education was gradually replaced by Western education. So this gave people access to modern knowledge, but also reduced the importance of local language and traditional learning. Next is religious and cultural changes. So Colonial influence introduced Western values and beliefs through missionary school and social institutions. So, by influence the religion and culture, missionary schools helps to spread Western values and ideas. Although local traditions remain important, many communities adapt to their cultural practices to fit the new influence brought by colonial rule. And the third is ethnic division and social structure. So, colonial powers implemented the divide and rule policy. So, different ethnic groups were placed in different areas and occupations. For example, Malaysians live in villages, while Chinese in towns and Indians on plantations. So, this strengthened the ethnic identities and create social division that continue after independence. And the next point is nationalism and social transformations. So, colonialism contribute to the rise of the nationalism and social transformations. By educated locals began demanding independence and developing a stronger national identity. At the same time, Western legal system and administrative structure changed the way society was governed and influenced social values. So that's all from me for the cultural impact of colonialism. So now I will be passing the presentation to my friend. Thank you.
So to wrap up our entire presentation today, we'll look at the conclusion. So in conclusion, colonialism was a powerful, brutal system that permanently changed the economic, political, social, and also cultural structures of the colonialized nations. Historical policies like resource exploitation and famous divide and rule tactics are the direct cause of many our modern problems today, such as the ethnic division and rich-poor economic gaps. And understanding this painful colonial legacy is the absolute key to help the modern societies and public administrators fix these old issues, heal the gaps, and also build the more united futures. So with that, we end our presentation. Thank you so much for listening.